buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much for being with us and for being with us throughout this sui generis panel, which is a conversation between associations of intellectual property that is called Putting All the Paths Towards IP or PI. Before everything, I want to present all the members of the panel. I want to thank you for the kindness that you've had with the ASIPI. And I want to start to my left with Mladen Vukmir from ECTA in Croatia, Myrtha Hurtado from PTMG in Suiza. We have Sharon from FICPI, USA. We also have Maria Scungio from AIPPI, United States, and we have Patrick Coyne from AIPLA, United States. So thank you very much and welcome. The format we will be giving to this conversation will be that each one of them is going to make a brief kind of conversation about their respective associations. 5 minutes, each one of them, to talk briefly about the association. Who are they? What are they focused on? Who do they represent? What are they doing in pro of intellectual property and their partners? And when they finish with the presentation, we will start with this conversation to just make an interchange of ideas. Where can we have synergies, and where can we take each one of these associations in pro of the intellectual property worldwide and each one of its partners? So to the left, Mladen, if you could begin. Croatia, but he already threatened me that he could speak in English, Spanish, Italian, so thank you very much. I will be talking in English. Nonetheless, I want to thank for being here. I'm very, very happy for being here once again in ASIPI, because I've already visited them before, and it's always a pleasure.
English, this being also in a way language in which in European Union most of us communicate, in spite of having all the languages as official languages, the English is the one, and certainly at ECTA we speak English. It is somewhat of a reverse order here that I get to present the association that I'm president of now. First, because it's the last one that was founded. We are the youngest here on the stage. And this is what, it is 42 years old. It was founded in 1980. And this in itself shows part of its nature. While most of the association here are actually offspring of Paris and Berne Convention systems, it can be argued that ECTA is not. We are offspring of Rome Agreement, of the treaty that founded European Union. And we were founded in order to enable and improve a creation of the common market. And now this is really something important, because I personally view the age of Paris and Berne Convention sunsetting somewhat. We will, in the future, I'm quite convinced, need different basis for intellectual property regulation for our businesses. But at this moment, obviously, it's still very much what it is. But if you think really what European Union does, it undermined at least one aspect of the Paris and Berne Convention, that's its territoriality. We created a market that is not defined by national jurisdictions, which are obviously a basis for the 19th century idea of intellectual property. And we are somewhat aware as an association of that. But if we think about what we did over the last 40 years, and this is what I want to present. We work with the partners who are European Commission, European Intellectual Property Office. We, of course, work with WIPO. We consider them as partners. We hold bilateral meetings. The association itself has around between 1,200, 1,500 members, depending on the year and the pandemic, as I am sure that all of us probably had some fluctuation in this period. So these are mostly registered European representatives, meaning agents, both lawyers and engineers. And although ECTA's original name was European Community Trademark Association, we outgrew both formats, community, which changed into union, and trademarks, because we are devoted to all, like most of us had the same trajectory, except probably the patents, yet we are looking, we have a mandate from our supervisory board to look into patents on an experimental basis. We didn't do much yet about it, but we did a lot in copyright, which was last founded in GIs, in designs, obviously, because we have the European design system parallel to, and so on. So I think that this is, as an introduction, sufficient to know ECTA.
Thank you very much. So that basically, that means that, if I'm going to go back to Spanish. Entonces me imagino que significa que...
So I imagine it means that if the experiment in patents works, you will change the name?
There was a proposal actually to call it European Copyright and Trademark Association when we ventured into copyright. But then we decided just to keep the acronym as the full name. So there is no more...
Para no perder identidad.
Yes.
Totalmente.
Yes.
Just to not lose identity, right? Yes. So thank you very much. Let's go with Myrtha Hurtado. Thank you very much for that invitation, Enrique. It is a pleasure to be here sharing the front with these illustrious speakers. I'm the chairwoman, although in the organization they call me chairman. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to get used to the term. So now we're called PTMG, Pharmaceutical Market Group. It was born in September of 1970 in England. It's an association which was centered around everything that had to do with Great Britain in the beginning, but it started expanding, and I believe that the interesting point of the association is that, well, this year we had the 100th conference that was celebrated in Lisbon, but the association is dedicated exclusively to pharmaceutical elements and only to IP without patents, and we don't have the intention of including patents for the moment. I don't want to exclude it forever, but at the moment there are no discussions going around in terms of expansion. We believe that what we are embarking at the moment, we are handling a lot, and the association is really dedicated to create an educational and important content that has to do not only with intellectual property, but also with legal affairs, anti-piracy or counterfeiting, everything that is really important for the pharmaceutical universe. And probably the most special element are that the members must be employees from a pharmaceutical company. You cannot be a member if you're not working for a pharmaceutical company. The associated members can be evidently firm laws or other kind of people that are interested in the topic, but to be able to get the membership, you have to submit your candidature to the management committee, who will later decide if they accept or not the person or organization. I believe that another interesting point that we have within our organization is that we want to be limited to a specific number of members, but above all, not only members, but because for those that we are in-house, we're always open in the conferences, but we do have a limited number of participants in the conference of spring and autumn, fall. Therefore, we want to maintain an entity of community while we're still 400, at most 450 in the element of fall or autumn, we can create the synergy between the fact that we have all the representatives of the pharmaceuticals, not only big companies but also small, and also those that work with them. And you create a close community, but it also brings a lot of relationship, friendship, and of course, points of interest. I believe that differentiates us to the other organizations that always want to grow in number of participants, number of events, and things that we do. But in PTMG, we only have a conference in spring, another one in autumn or fall. Well, after the pandemic, obviously, it was through webinars. But really, we don't do more than this, and the content or the objective is purely educational. Okay, thank you very much. I'll give the turn now to Sergio Barragan, who comes on behalf of INTA, Mexico. Okay, thank you very much, Enrique, for inviting us. And on behalf of INTA, we want to extend our thanks to you and the organization. So I have here my notes if I have just to not commit any errors. So I will be using these notes to give me support. Many of you know INTA. INTA is a global association that brings together the holders of brands and professionals that are related to topics of PI or intellectual property, with the intention of promoting the usage of the brand amongst the consumers, economical growth, and innovation. The role of the association, the main role, is to serve its members and to be an association with non-profit purposes, with the intention of promoting the intensive use of brands in society and making an advocacy of the social and economical growth of these brands. It's an association that brings together 6,500 organizations, from them around 20% are corporate members. In total, there are more than 34,000 members, and this is conformed by big corporations, multinationals, small and medium companies, law firms, law practitioners, NGOs, government agencies, offices of brands, and educational institutions. We have regional offices around the globe in the 5 continents. The headquarters is in the United States. We have offices around the world in Brussels, Singapore, Santiago of Chile is one of the newest ones, Beijing. And we'll have consultories or offices in Africa and the Middle East. The way that INTA works is that it's a member-run organization, which means that the members are the ones that handle and make an administration of the corporation. The association is, of course, backgrounded by a very big staff of members and employees of INTA, but it's also conformed, the board are 36 members, and from them there is a lawyer, a council, 2 advisory directors, and they are selected every 3 years, and every 3 years they are renewed, but this is scaled. Every year we have new members of the board, so there's a consistency and there's a continuity within the objectives that the board has. It's important to mention that this is an organization that's been fighting and struggling for diversity, inclusion, trying to be an organization that is much more international, global. And an example of this is the 50% of the presidents, up to the moment, 50% of the presidents have been women. There is still a long path to advance in other topics of diversity, but the association is working hard in this segment. 2/3 parts of the members of the board are corporate members, and they work in committees. These internal committees within the board define the critical issues in terms of how the organization works. So there is a financing committee, there's an audit committee, there's a planning committee. We have the executive committee, which is formed by the CEO, the president of the association. The CEO is an employee of INTA. The president of the association is an honorific mention that lasts for a year. and it's formed by members of the board and previous presidents or future presidents. That's the way in which the board works for the correct functioning of the association. Now, which are the main functions that the association has? 5, we make a lot of advocacy and topics of piracy, restriction of brands. That is a topic that's had a lot of influence lately, and it's very important for the association. We have the Internet Committee. We have emerging affairs, copyrights, designs. We also have resources, which is through education, and resources contains everything that has to do with innovation. The Design Committee, in terms of data protection. We have other pillars of communication. And we also have the Dance for a Better Society, which is an important action that we are currently promoting within the association. There are topics of education through professional development. We have the consumer average that has to do with a real and, well, different syntax that we have been doing lately, and we also work in a close manner with other association. With the CPI, there's a very close relationship. We have made a couple of studies all together with the purpose of promoting the value of the brands within society. So in general terms, this is what the association is, and that's it. Thank you very much, Sergio. Let us continue with Sharon Crane on behalf of FICPI.
Hi, I'm Sharon Crane. I'm currently the Deputy Secretary General of FICPI. We have a relatively small bureau. Unfortunately, our president was not able to be here. We have a president, vice president, treasurer, secretary general, 2 deputy secretary generals. We are a very worldwide organization. We have almost 6,000 members from 80 different countries. That fluctuates a little bit up and down from time to time. We have a very organized application procedure for membership. There are applications through each national or regional member of FICPI, and you need to have some kind of recommendation from your colleagues in order to be accepted. And we find this is, it's really wonderful for us. It's the only NGO that is entirely comprised of attorneys in private practice, so law firms. We don't have members from companies. And we feel that by having this application process and controlling our membership, we feel very comfortable in being able to say, I have a member from Colombia, and I know that he is very competent and going to do a very good job for my client. So I'm going to call Enrique because he's a member and he's been qualified through FICPI. FICPI focuses, I would say, on 2 different things. Our motto, I'm not going to say it completely correctly, but we want to strengthen the practice of IP attorneys. And we do trademark and patents. I would say we're probably a little bit more patent heavy than ASIPI is. And part of the way that we do that is through education and also practice management. So there are a few, we have a number of different committees, a couple of which I'm co-chairing at the moment, which I'll get to later. But the main committees that we have are the work and study, which we call CET because it's a French acronym. And I failed to mention that FICPI is a French acronym, which I will not be able to do justice to, but basically is International Federation of Intellectual Property Attorneys. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize the slides were coming up. We have this lovely slide deck, so I thought I might use it as advertisement while we're here. I'm not going to go, if you want to just sort of advance through, I'm not going to go slide by slide. But we have a Study and Work Commission, which we call CET, and this is comprised of 7 different working groups, and I'm probably not going to remember all of them. But we have trademarks and designs and biotech patents and high-tech patents and European patents, international patents, dispute resolution, and I think I've probably missed one, but 7 altogether. I would say that the FICPI committees are very, very active, and the FICPI meetings are very, very intense, actually. We work hard and play hard, just like ASIPI does. We have wonderful meetings in various wonderful places around the world. But part of the focus of the CET is to prepare white papers and ultimately to prepare resolutions. And we meet with various patent offices around the world every year, and we distribute these resolutions and discuss and try to influence policy around the world, patents and trademarks. Another main committee that we have is our practice management group, and this focuses on trying to assist attorneys with practice development, with law firm management, et cetera. And that's part of our strengthening the practice of the IP attorney. And one other of our major committees is the Teaching and Education Committee. And that committee, in addition to assisting in planning our meetings, which I'll go into in a minute, also does various patent drafting courses around the world. We've done South America, Southeast Asia, Europe, and we actually just recently started working with WIPO on a patent drafting course, and I was lucky enough to be one of those tutors. Our meetings are usually, we have one big meeting each year. Every 3 years we have a Congress, which is limited to members, but on the other 2 off years, we have fora, and those are open to anybody. So I'm also going to put a pitch in here. First week of October in 2023, we have an open forum in London, so you're all invited. I hope you'll join us. Some of the other committees that we have, webinar committee, we're actually right now working very closely with the ASIPI and in particular Giselle, to set up some joint FICPI ASIPI webinars. We also have our own FICPI webinars about every 2 weeks, which are made into podcasts. And finally, we have the diversity committee, which is unfortunately just newly started. And we don't have a nice 50% so far of male and female presidents, but we're hoping to change that. So that's one of the goals of the diversity committee.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Sharon. María Scungio de AIPPI.
Maria Scungio from AIPPI.
To Enrique, Díaz, and also other colleagues of ASIPI that put this program together. Really a privilege to be here. Thank you. I've been a member of AIPPI for some time, maybe 15 years. I am the second vice president for the association on the bureau. The organization has an illustrious history spanning 125 years and had its early days in Europe. Our headquarters today is in Zurich, but our membership has grown and grown over the years, and we predate WIPO, so we were one of the earliest associations to foster open conversations about encouraging development of IP laws to protect innovation and to have a discussion about harmonization. That makes the work, even today, exciting. We have 131 members from a national group point of view, 8,000 members total, I think, at this time. The way in which our association structures its work and its voice is not just to focus on IP laws and protection, but to have a process for giving national groups an opportunity in a working Congress to present their views about subject matter. We define 4 IP subject matters every year. This is a more recent event to have an annual Congress. They used to skip. But the work is exciting. It starts in December with identifying 4 questions. Ultimately, the goal is to issue 4 resolutions that are voted by the Congress. And what happens in the middle is much like making sausage behind the curtains. That's one way to describe it. But it's a diligent approach to collect national group responses and come up with a reasoned summary of what those results are. And out of that work, a white paper is generated. This year, the topics will be moral rights, sorry, that was last year's, collecting societies, doctrine of equivalence, trademark use, and also infringement liability in online marketplaces. Traditionally, there will be a patent question, a trademark question, a copyright question, trade secrets once in a while, and a litigation question as well. Our membership is very broad. It is educators, it's government employees, it's litigators, it's prosecutors, agents, attorneys, the full gamut. And the future of IP for us is very much dependent on engagement with younger practitioners who are coming into the profession, and we are working on ways to enhance that engagement, not only with our annual Congress, but throughout the calendar year. We've just updated our website, so if there's interest in the audience, I encourage you to take a peek. It's quite nice. It's at a lovely refresh. We work through committees. They are focused on subject matter. There are 25 of them, and they are connected to very modern problems, including AI, including green technology, including the internet. Also, there is an amicus committee. So we are not strictly an advocacy group, but our voice is meant to be in a non-governmental way. A layer of important data that's been collected through the membership, which is presented to IPOs, IP offices all around the world, as well as WIPO and other IP associations. So there is a final impact for some of the work that we do. And some of the problems we influence are quite exciting. My colleague Patrick worked with AIPPI patiently for putting up an argument about the enforceability of foreign judgments in the IP space and making sure that the intellectual property piece was taken out of a proposed Hague agreement. And it was through AIPPI's neutral presence in diplomatic discussions that message was put through. So for those of you who are not yet AIPPI members, take a look. We have signed an agreement with ASIPI very recently in September to foster collaboration, and we look forward to continued work with ASIPI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Now we're going with Patrick Coyne from AIPLA.
Want to start us? Can we get the next slide, please? AIPLA is also 125 years old this year. We were founded the same year. We were founded in Washington. Can you switch one more? We were founded in Washington, D.C. by a former Civil War Union general who was practicing patent law at the time, and a couple of his buddies, about 16 of his buddies. As far as I can tell, it was mostly a dinner group at first, but they engaged in advocacy. And that's probably one, in terms of what do we all do that's similar, there's a lot of overlap. But in terms of what we do that's different, advocacy probably is a larger piece of what AIPLA does than many other organizations. It always has been, since the very beginning. I went back through the archives last December. It was our 125th anniversary, and I attended yours as well in Brussels. And I found some fascinating information dating back a century or more about the type of work we had done. For years, it was focused on patents. It was the Washington Patent Law Association. And then sometime around mid-century, we realized that trademarks and copyrights are just as important to American corporations as well. And we changed the name in the 70s to the American Intellectual Property Law Association. It was changed from Washington Patent Law to American Patent Law to the American Intellectual Property Law Association. So we do cover everything: patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets. Most of our members, in all fairness, are patent attorneys. Most of them are prosecutors. A smaller fraction of the patent attorneys are litigators, and a very small fraction, including me, does all of it. You have a substantial number of trademark overlap with INTA. We have a lot of trademark function as well, and a fairly substantial copyright function as well. We're also branching into other areas: data rights, privacy, internet issues of all types that come up related to IP, but not traditional IP issues. We have over 7,000 members. Now, as Maria mentioned, ours has varied over the years as well. Typically, when the Congress is considering new legislation, and it's likely to pass, we will get a huge jump in membership because people want the educational programs so that they can learn what the new legislation is all about. And then as the bills sit there and get enforced by the courts, the membership usually falls down. In all fairness, we did, unlike other associations like ASIPI, we did take a hit during COVID because most of our work is done in person. Most of our meetings, we have 3 meetings a year, different cities, and we were unable to hold any of them for 2 years. We resumed about 1.5 years ago, and we had a tremendous showing this last October, so we're kind of back in the track. But in the course of that, we reduced our headquarters staff dramatically. We're now down to 9 people of headquarters staff. I'm sorry, can you go back to the same slide? Yep. We have a board of 21. That includes an executive committee of all of the officers and people on the ladder and the past president. And then they rotate each 3 years. About 1/3 of them go off and another 1/3 come in. Our work is not done by the board. The board sets policy. The board decides what positions we're going to take on various issues. And we take a lot of positions on a lot of issues. We would put in amicus briefs in US courts and sometimes European courts if they're willing to take them. Asia tends to be less receptive. We do often participate in making comments on rulemaking, new legislation, administrative proposals, and we will do that with offices, IP offices around the world. We've done it with INPI, we've done it with EPO regularly, we've done it with WIPO, and we will probably continue to do it because it's our core function. We really do 3 basic things. We used to do 4. With the 3 that we focused on, we had our strategic planning meeting last October and September, and what we decided is the 4th one we were not doing well, so we're not going to keep doing it. Our primary purpose is advocacy. When I say primary, I don't mean 100% of what we do, but we do more advocacy than most other nonprofit bar associations. We are all individual members. So we have no corporate memberships, no institutional members. Everybody is an attorney. They could be corporate, they could be government, they could be a judge, they could be paralegals, but they have to have some involvement in the IP space. There's no qualification to get in. Just apply and pay your dues. Secondly, we do a lot of education. I would say that's probably most of what the time we spend. We provide hundreds of programs a year, ranging from in-person meetings like this, to webinars, to small gatherings, to water cooler meetings, all kinds of things to try to bring people the information they want in the most efficient way. And what I consider at my age and my tenure in this profession is networking. It allows me, and that's what I've gotten out of this personally, I think. It allows me to meet other people. I was talking to Joe Ray, the president before me. Joe and I both clerked at the Federal Circuit 40 years ago. And we were just musing about what have we gotten out of being in the leadership of an association. And what we resolved, yes, alcohol was involved, okay, but what we got out of it was we both realized it's made us way smarter than we otherwise would have been. We've been exposed to so many other kinds of people who do other types of things, even in our profession, and it's made us better, smarter, brighter as intellectual property lawyers. So I would hazard to you that's probably the biggest benefit of any of these associations is the relationships you make, the friendships that you make, the intellectual advancements you can make by learning from other people and sharing.
Muchas gracias, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And now we will start with a series of ideas. We have seen that, well, evidently and personally, when we all share our profession and as we share intellectual property, there's always an ego component because we all want to be in the best association and allow our associations to grow even more. Well, except for Myrtha. Myrtha won't accept today any more spaces or any more new members. But if we go into specific topics of intellectual property and the impact And I would like to listen from the story of each one of you and the associations, right? 125 years, 140 years, it doesn't matter. What do you believe has been the greatest contribution of the association to the world of intellectual property? One or two ideas, starting one by one.
ECTA, for sure, made equally big contributions to building of the European Union as to advancing its intellectual property system. In my acceptance speech earlier this year, I have singled out that my main motive of joining ECTA was actually the part of building Europe. So for me personally, many members will have different views, and they put their professional interests ahead. And the way how we do it is with the partners that I have mentioned. We have very close working relations. So all of the instruments of the legal structure of the European Union in the field of intellectual property is something where we have participated. Designs, trademarks, most notably. So we keep contributing to their periodical evaluation together. So these are probably the biggest contributions that we made. There are others, you know, but.
Gracias.
Yo creo que desde el punto de vista de PTMG,
I believe that from the point of view of PTMG, one of the greatest contributions is the fact that knowing that there's a platform given by the organization where you can yearly encounter all the members of the industry. We have created a system where the topics of interest for a professional and intellectual property in the pharmaceutical environment can be spoken, practiced, discussed in a very casual manner before agreeing if, as an industry, we want to take important positions in front of something, and from the point of view of the legislation or from the point of view of the creation of new rights. I believe this is incredibly important because the in-houses, we cannot go out publicly to say, hey, this is our position when something is starting to move or when a new topic is coming along. Being in PTMG gives you the opportunity to sit down with your peers, have a conversation around certain issues, topics, and you can know who's interested, who not around certain topics. It's a matter of regions. And you can talk about sensitive topics, and then you can give it a tram it. And other organizations that we work with to make advocacy also allows us to approach in an informal way. And I would also say that PTMG keeps being a place where many litigations are solved throughout the conferences, because you go there, you speak with your direct competition, you sit down without any attorneys, without any lawyers, and you just sit down and say, okay, how's it going to be? Are we going to fight or are we going to look for a solution? And that has an amazing value for the companies because you save an amount of time and money. And I believe this is something that we want to continue doing because it really facilitates our day by day. Yeah, everything except the part that there's no lawyers, right? It looks like we're the ones that shouldn't be there, but I understand it. Yes, of course, and no, we have to talk first with the attorney before going to talk with the competition. You know how it goes. Sergio? In the case of INTA, I think that the main contribution is that throughout the years it has promoted the value of the brands in the economy and society. It's an association focused towards brands that little by little starts opening to rights associated to intellectual property like copyrights, and step by step you go into designs. But in terms of brand, that has been the main focus, promoting the value of the brands and the value that the brands have in society in all the aspects. It's something that is evolving. You start with the initial role of the brands, which was to show what was the participation of these brands in the economy and the growth of the economies of each country. And nowadays it's starting to take this new concept of having a more active role in social issues and topics of diversity or in environmental topics. And INTA basically is focusing on this and is evolving. The brands evolve, INTA evolves at the same time, supporting the evolution of these brands. My personal experience as an in-house or as a board member of INTA allows me to agree with Myrtha. I believe that one of the great elements that I've personally seen is networking. You mainly meet and know a lot of people, and it opens a platform to solve millions of things, to avoid going into absurd litigations or spending absurdly money. When I was hired in this company, the first thing that they told me is, hey, we're contracting you to avoid litigations, not to make them. And INTA becomes an amazing platform because in these different meetings that you sustain and this yearly meetings or the leadership meeting or other meetings, you have the opportunity of meeting people and having conversations over common topics. And it is amongst attorneys, but not with your boxing gloves ready to go and fight. No. I believe that in the look of resolutions, INTA is a great, great platform for this. Sharon?
I'm going to mention two. The one I find, in my opinion, would be our greatest achievement is the courses that we've taught. And I think while these have been going on for a number of years, I think one of the effects is actually to increase the diversity in our profession. And so by doing this in South America, Southeast Asia, this WIPO course that we were involved in brought in young IP professionals or budding IP professionals and really taught them the mechanics of claim drafting and application drafting. And it was really an amazing experience to meet all these young people from all over the world, many of whom don't have the resources to go to special training courses, and so a lot of these students were given tuition exceptions for this WIPO course. I feel that our education of young and diverse IP professionals is really one of our most important contributions. The other one I want to mention is that our professional management committee, I think, was a very innovative committee, and I think we were one of the first to introduce really a large stream of our organization focusing on practice management. And I'm going to embarrass a past president and my current partner and husband, partner in crime, who actually started this committee a number of years ago, started as the Professional Excellence Committee and is now the Professional Management Committee. And we spend a lot of time really talking about the management of law firms, marketing, tools for us to use, digital tools, etc. And I think that spending a good portion of our time on sort of that advanced level of training is another great contribution that we've made.
Thank you very much, Maria.
Well, I'm going to go back to the Hague example because I'm a pragmatist at heart, and to be able to go back to a client and explain that something I did with an association or something that my colleagues did actually made a difference, that's the easy choice. So because I sit in the United States, there are times where our State Department and others in the role of being advocates for a position may not be invited into the room. And with the Hague example a few years ago, the US government was not invited into the room. But I learned about the Hague Agreement draft, and it had been prepared by commercial lawyers who had less sensitivity to IP issues. And let's face it, if you have a wonderful victory for your client, of course you would like that decision to be applicable in another jurisdiction. But in the main, you can't win every time. And each national legal system has a different process for litigation that might include or exclude evidence that would be quite valuable to the discussion. So for us, that work, AIPPI's scientific approach, which is We run surveys through national groups. We collect the data. We prepare the data in a white paper format. Because of our comfort with that process, our respectability and appreciation through IPO offices with that process and The Hague, we were able to react, generate surveys quickly, come up with a work product that represented accurately our wish for this language about enforceability of judgments to be removed with respect to IP. And ultimately, we were invited to the diplomatic discussion for that language to be taken out. And in that way, it wasn't just a thought project. It was a practical result for talented colleagues to step up and generate high-quality work to support our being in the room and asking for that adjustment.
Muchas gracias, Patrick.
Gracias. I would say first would be advocacy. We present balanced advocacy for both the owners and users of the IP system. And a lot of patent owner lawyers don't realize that that is drop dead critical, because if the system falls out of balance in either way, it doesn't have public support and it doesn't serve the functions it has to serve. So one of the things that's involved, and I'll use the segue that you just did, about 10 years ago, we acquired AIPPI US, and AIPLA is also now the US subsidiary of AIPPI. We have about a little less than 10% foreign members. We have a class of membership for foreign attorneys to join. We have about 10% of our 7,000 members are outside the United States. And about 15% of the attendees at our meetings are international. So that requires us to be very sensitive of the concerns in other countries. And I would say the segue is we are, I think, have been very persuasive, not effective yet, but persuasive on harmonization. It's drop dead critical that we eliminate some of these problems. For example, I know we were on probably what you would view in terms of pure harmonization on the wrong side of the issue on The Hague, but we're not ready. We all still have national systems. At some point, maybe we will be ready, and then we'll reevaluate that position. The second thing is education. And it isn't just education for US attorneys. We have our mandatory bars have CLE requirements in the US that you have to comply with, or you get penalized, or your bar tickets get revoked. So we try to provide high quality education. We can do the advocacy faster than other groups. Like ABA, it's like turning an aircraft carrier. They can't develop a position quickly because it has to go through the entire Board of Governors. But we can, it just has to go through our board. So we can actually respond in real time and get briefs filed. And in the education sector, it's not just the mandatory education we provide to US practitioners. We do 6 or 7 foreign trips a year to visit our colleagues in other countries. We invite them, you, to come visit us so that we can learn from each other about what works. And I think that is incredibly beneficial.
Muchas gracias, Patrick. Creo que escuchamos a...
Thank you, Patrick. I think we heard everyone. I think we are all in common. We're in a platform without mattering or caring the specific sector or industry or in the area of intellectual property that we're located in. But how effective, how actively or reactively should be the role of associations in terms of intellectual property policies? How should the associations be moving from your point of view at a level of accompaniment? Should they be in the vanguard trying to accelerate changes or stop changes? Now I want to start with you, Patrick, on your side. What I mean is the association, should it supervise, should it look for a role, a vanguard kind of role, how to carry that system of intellectual property? Obviously, what you mentioned at the end of your last intervention was balance. How active is the action of IPLA and the legislational changes? How should the association play?
This really quick. I think it should be a very active role. And I appreciate the advocacy is a concern in some countries, but it is drop dead important. Take the last example from 2 to 6 years ago in the United States. We had an administration that, I don't know, just didn't care anymore. So who's carrying the water during that period? The bar associations is what is doing it. It is what is continuing that engagement internationally. It's continuing that engagement to try to improve the system. So if we could get the slide back up, I'll give you a book title that I think is fantastic. The guy's name is Joseph Hendricks. He used to teach at the University of British Columbia, and he's a social evolutionary historian. And he basically looked at Western civilization, which is what we're all living, and he came up with, it's the title of the book. Can you go 2 more? Okay, that's it. There you go, perfect. The weird, the weirdest. Yeah, that one, next one. Okay, the weirdest people in the world. His acronym is Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic. And he basically lists 4 things that he felt made the West and the Americas what they are today. And that is, we started off getting information from family, but then we started moving toward guilds in the 12 and 1300s, where you affiliated with like craftsmen and shared information. And guess what? You became smarter. You made better stuff when you did that. Better than your father could have taught you, better than your uncle could have taught you. Then religion came in and changed the whole social structure of what is now the West. You no longer could marry a cousin, and a lot of other things. But the most important thing I think he says in his book is voluntary associations have now assumed that role. Voluntary associations is where we share. It's where we learn from each other. You don't have to be limited to what your father knew or your uncle knew. You can actually do better stuff than they did because you can learn from all of your peers, all of your colleagues, and you can learn the best practices. So that's why I think associations have a critical role in this. A government agency is responding to the policy of the executive in charge of that government, and they have an agenda. So truly, and I appreciate that some associations have an agenda, and I won't name any names, but some associations are much more pro-patent owner. Some are much more pro-user, to the point of running bus ads that say, with dead people on a plank that says, patents kill in the Washington area during COVID. But we try to be balanced, and that's what you get out of a consensus that you can build out of a voluntary group of professionals. You can achieve a balance that governments can't. And because you have a power to affect the next election, you can influence the government in its position.
Maria, please.
Thank you. I agree with what you said, Patrick, and for AIPPI's perspective, you know, at the top is spurring innovation and protection of IP rights and harmonization and creating work product that fosters those 2 prongs. So the way I think I have experienced my membership and the work that we do together, it's at a level of high quality, because I think as IP attorneys, we care very much about the law and getting it right. And as we monitor different developments in national laws, in treaties, in other collaborations, and we begin to see a conversation forming, we take it on board as an issue that should be on our plate to create work product that people can refer to. Hopefully, to set the table for more conversations. Hopefully, sometimes it takes several tries, but that's the aim of the mission, for us to be activists as lawyers, but not with a national agenda, with a global agenda.
Thank you, Sharon, please. Thank you, Maria.
I'm going to give you an example of a recent, really being involved in changes in legislation in the U.S. For those of you who do patent work, you may know that the U.S. has spawned a terrible issue with subject matter eligibility and what can and cannot be patented. And FICPI has actually has had a member involved in these discussions between the pro-reform group and the concerned group, quote unquote. What you may not know, we have a statute called 101, which is supposed to be a very low bar about, you know, what can you patent, you know, composition, method, etc. And our Supreme Court has really screwed up patent law in a terrible way, and unfortunately I think it's spreading to other jurisdictions. But there have been conversations and legislative hearings over the last few years. We've attended hearings, we've been involved in basically the negotiations between the pro-reform and the concerned group, and have actually literally made suggestions about the wording of a new bill that's been introduced. And we're not sure where that's going to go and how fast it's going to go, but we feel like we really made a very significant contribution to a change in the law, which we hope is going to make a big difference in patent law in the U.S.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bueno, definitivamente yo creo.
Well, definitely, I believe that the role has to be proactive more than reactive, because when you're reactive, usually you can get there late and perhaps your actions won't have the same effect or the same strength. Now, INTA, as I mentioned, is a member-driven organization, which means that it's conformed and it's operated by its own members. Being it like that, it's conformed by experts in the matter. Therefore, you have the best people, the people that know the most in legal subjects and brands within the association. Therefore, you need to make a lot of advocacy. We have a committee of emerging issues. This committee is usually looking which are the trends of society, the trends of the location of the brand, what is the brand giving to society. This is very important because you need to be a step ahead. If we don't participate in a proactive manner in the change of legislation, for example, or to remember that the governments have agendas, and those agendas must continue. But I believe we can influence that agenda, and we have to do it in a proactive manner, because if it advances, it will become much more complex. I don't mean that it's impossible, but it does become much more complex. Thank you very much. Myrtha? Thank you very much, Enrique. So PTMG, in conscious manner, decided to not go into the environment of advocacy because the companies make tramit through the associations of industry. Therefore, they make a tramit of FMP&A with the American Association or the European Associations or globally. But if you allow me to make an observation, because I believe that I'm one of the few that participate in 4 of the associations that are represented here. I have collaborated with AIPPI as well, so I collaborate with 5 of them. And just as Sergio mentioned, Patrick mentioned, and also my dear colleagues, is that you definitely have to be proactive. That's a role as associations. We must always be thinking further and beyond. We must always try to identify which will be the next issue that's going to be coming down the road. Not only which is the legislational change or the restriction that will be coming, but which is the next problem, the next issue. We're seeing how science and economy is evolving. How can we anticipate which are those challenges and the opportunities we will be able to see in the future? And one of my opportunities being in all these organizations is that what Patrick mentioned is elemental. We must be quick, fast. I really appreciate the work that IPPI does. When there is a report of PPI, I always read it quickly because I know that it's a very well done job, and also that it's in the long term. It's not that just a problem came on and in 2 months we will have a report about this. And I believe that's why we have the validity of all these associations. Some of them can act very quickly, others need a bit more of time. But I do believe that looking at the complexity of what's coming along throughout these days, we must also think in how we can make these procedures of decision in a quicker way, and the size of our boards, our executive committees, and try to find ways to be a little bit more of agent and lean to be able to serve our members in a better way.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Myrtha.
Thanks. I mean, that's why I have a pleasure, among many other members, working with Myrtha. I completely share her views. We need to be proactive and we need to move fast. We are behind what we have, where we should have been. And this happened sometimes around 2010, if you remember the period of the anti-IP sentiment, which found us all on the defensive. We were offended that society was not asking its experts, that's us supposedly. We were reacting negatively to what the other new experts were saying. Pirate parties, you know, you name them. When I was on the INTA board, we had a meeting with European MEPs from the Pirate Party. And we have learned from them. I can tell you as an INTA director there. You know, so why were we not there before them? And that's the question we should all be asking ourselves. You know, And speed of change is just, it's speeding up. The technology is driving it, but the answer should be, in my view, humanity. The answer to technology is to find new ways for us to contribute as individuals to the society. And that's what our associations should be doing in the future.
Muchísimas gracias, Mladen. Yo creo que lo que señala Myrtha es correcto.
Thank you very much. I believe you're all correct. I believe we're all complementary. I'm also sitting in different associations that we have here. And if, well, I have to represent today this one, I also participate with the different associations in one way or another. And one of the things that I would love to highlight or underline is that in the association, we're always focused in alternative ways of controversy. We definitely do not want poor clients after a litigation of 10 years. And if we can make these or solve these problems in a quick way, it would be greater. But in all this path of solving controversies we can find with complicated and epic topics sometimes, how much did the association influence in the management and care of each one of those members that are forming them in an active way? And let's understand and I know that it could be a bit different, but how much should we participate in ethical topics in terms of the association with the different members? And I mean, how do we perform our activities? Should we be proactive, not only in education and others, but also in sanctions?
Cuando mencioné
Most important component. So obviously it should be dominant. Sometimes when we are now confronting the issues in the artificial intelligence field, I always tell people that I work with and where I teach also, I tell them, look, lawyers and techies are singularly weak in face of ethical questions. It's not part of what we somehow educated to take care of. We need instruments to deal with it. So yes, the ethical part is central. And another topic, if I may add to this, that we should be paying much, much more attention is the shifting place of law in our societies. It's not staying where we were educated to think about where it is. It's not anymore central axis of our social organization. Law has huge problems serving complex societies with the complex factual patterns of transactions that it just can't cope with it. So we should be saying this. We should be discussing, devoting, time. We cannot pretend just, law, it's 3,000 years or whatever, 300 years. Well, things change.
Thank you. Myrtha.
Si me permites, Enrique, yo sé que tú partes del principio que la ética es una.
If you'll allow me, you start from the principle that ethics are one thing, but unfortunately, ethics has so many different perspectives in our associations and in society. There are so many different values, and each of us can see things differently. And so, unfortunately, due to the fact that we have different procedures to handle for seniority, for example, for us, for many years, we've had the same people in executive committees and the same companies. And it's nice that there's a system of tradition, of values in our association, but the question that arises is, how updated are those values with regards to the social reality that we're experiencing, and how agile is our association when adapting to these things? How open-minded are we when it comes to making an effort to recruit new people who don't think like us? Objectively, you have to make the decision to decide that despite not agreeing with someone, it's important to be diverse. And bringing those people forward so that we have more updated ethics, more so than what we tend to value because it's been successful in the past. And so the changes that we're going through now have to make us think differently, so that we can have a more shared ethics. The thing is, ethics have a single definition. I understand that society continues to evolve and things change, but ethics are one. The social concepts change and we have to adapt. I 100% agree, but that is the problem that I find often when we are in practice. There are fundamental bases, and it is true that we are influenced by our own beliefs. But we have to adjust. Yes, I completely agree with you. That has, I suppose, a code of conduct that is constantly revised, and this is how we have to manage our staff and the members of associations. So I agree. And so I do think that there's a process of interpretation that has to happen for us to constantly adjust to these things, but there is a structure. Stealing is stealing, of course, here and in China. ASIPI has an ethics committee, or had one at some point. INTA doesn't, but I don't know of it. In my experience and states we've been involved in, the state gets involved in conflicts between members, but that's what I was going to mention. There's a new committee, and it's one of the pillars of the organization, which is the Bradford Societies, where we talk about what brands contribute to societies. The consumer doesn't just buy a brand anymore because it's pretty or because it sells a lot. The consumer asks, what is the brand contributing to society? What is it contributing to the environment? What is it contributing to diversity and inclusion? And this is part of the values of our associations. Previous years, Tiki focused a lot on diversity and inclusion, and that's what it's doing. It's wondering, what are the contributions? How can we contribute to society? And that would be the ethical work that it does to manage these things.
Associations is to be examples of these issues that we're supporting. So, to the extent that we have diversity committees and we're talking about diversity and training diverse members, our leadership should also be diverse. To the extent that we're promoting green activities, our associations should also be green. We should be thinking about how much we're printing. We should think about how much we're flying around the world. FICPI has made some changes. We used to go to Asia every year, a group of us, and likewise with Europe, various other IP, governmental IP organizations. And now what we're doing is we're doing every other year. So we're having virtual meetings one year. So with Europe this year, it was virtual. Next year will be in person. Likewise with the Asian offices. And in this way, we maintain those contacts. We discuss important issues. And I think, as we all know, it's very important for us to meet in person. We've found that a couple years of not meeting in person really sort of diminishes the bonds that we've had. So we still feel like, yes, we need to meet in person sometimes, but to be able to control some of those costs, some of the emissions in flying around the world, I think is very important. One other thing that I'm proud of with FICPI is that we've actually suspended our Russian section temporarily until things are resolved. And we've allowed our Russian members to be individual members, but that section itself is suspended until things settle down. So I'm proud of us for taking a stand, and as I said, we've lost some members because of it, but we've kept some individual members.
Maria.
I'd like to agree with Myrtha's remarks earlier about bringing some fresher voices into some of the conversations, which can foster new conversations about ethical concerns. Or so from the AIPPI perspective, even though we have a committee structure focused on subject matter, and there are 2 spots per national group, and then a next spot for an in-house representative from a national group, we still felt that changes were needed, and we created an observer status. You don't get the chance to vote, but you get to be in the room and contribute to the committee conversations. And committees choose how frequently they wish to meet and what issues they want to bring to the front. But in that way, we're not waiting for a Congress, or we're not waiting for a more formal opportunity to paper up the discussion. It is a continuing conversation with a lot of respect afforded to everybody who participates. And in that way, we've had some refreshed enthusiasm about looking at these tougher questions and starting conversations.
Patrick.
So the quick answer to your question is yes, we are all social animals. We're probably the most sophisticated social animal on the planet. Sure, ants and bees do great stuff, but we have independence. They don't. And we choose to affiliate with one another. And that is a critical component. And that affiliation, that voluntary affiliation, means that, yes, things do change, getting back to your point initially. You look at the patent bar 100 years ago, it was all old white male guys, period, full stop. It has changed to go with the times, to go with advances in our society, and it needs to, and we do need to be at the forefront of that. On the issue of sanctions, no. The bottom line is the only sanction that I think is appropriate for a voluntary association is expulsion. You can't, if you're not going to play in the sandbox well, you get kicked out of the sandbox. That's the job of the mandatory bar. That's the job of the state, the court regulating its judiciary. And I think that there is not a role for the voluntary bar to be doing that. Short of, we've had situations, very, very few, but we were a big organization. We at one point had 13,000 members. Yeah, some of them act up sometimes in really bad ways. So we've had situations where we've had to expel people. But that's really the limit of the authority of the voluntary bar should be. That should be left to a judicial process with the mandatory bar. But enforcing ethics voluntarily, absolutely.
Excelente. Y aquí lo interesante, evidentemente, los diferentes componentes de cada una de estas asociaciones.
And this is where we talk about the different components of these associations, and especially the jurisdictions of each of the associations, because the case of the United States is quite easy, because you have the bar of each of the states, you have organizations and authorities that control every part of the exercise. What happens when you don't have a control of these professional exercise? Associations should take a primary role. For example, and I'll ask you, since you're in a specific industry, associations should have a primary role in certifying their associates, because here these associates are the ones who will be representing companies, what line you're in, what the practice is.
At somewhat frustrating pace, but that's the issue of abuse of the EU IPO credentials, where there was leasing of the credentials to Chinese agents, and they were filing in the names of people who were not, not those people who declared the access to the system. And obviously, these people were not our members. We didn't identify the firms that were, so that was just a broader professional issue. And we worked very slowly looking at the EU IPO, because it's their credentials after all. And actually they were resisting initially, but then they yielded, and they refined the credentials policies and allowed for sanctioning these people but they didn't want to do it themselves, but they expect the national bars. So you see, there's a European Union and then there are nations. It's not a single authority that can act easily. So yes, it is slow, but over the last 3 years, it did progress.
Bueno, un caso similar lo tuvieron en Estados Unidos.
There was a similar case in the United States. The same thing as in Europe happened in the United States with these applications coming from China, and they had to modify the law in order to apply certain restrictions, and it was the same thing, control.
Trademarks, Mary Dennison, spent an inordinate amount of effort trying to get a handle on this. We were not subjected to this type of abusive or fraudulent application in the 40 years I've been practicing, until about 5 years ago. And then the Chinese applicants come in with fake credentials or no credentials at all. So now our Trademark Modernization Act 2 years ago authorizes the office to impose a credentialing system and to verify the identity of the practitioner, because it's just out of hand. People are just cribbing something off the internet and copying it and saying, oh, this is my specimen of use. You didn't even use it. You're not even a player. You're simply sticking somebody up and hoping they'll pay you $1,500 later when they show up to claim their mark.
Claro. Uno de los temas aquí muy interesantes, sobre todo cuando uno se enfoca en la propia región de ASIPI.
When we focus on the ASIPI region, except countries like the United States, maybe Europe, Canada, the national bars don't have a real sanctioning effect. The national bar, like the case of Mexico or Brazil, they cannot suspend your license. So that's the example of how I think associations have to work together in order to find balance. We might decide if the values changed or grew. There are things that undoubtedly we would agree are wrong, and those are the actions that I think as a group we have to work on to seek to eradicate them in search of a better system and better balance. Now we have 5 minutes, and I'd like to make a final reflection from each of you with regards to the future of your associations and where you are now. A minute each, so we can conclude.
Of the session, and I think that one of the developments that we are going to see is being associations where in most of the cases we have individuals as members, but even if they are legal persons, even in that case, we will have, I think, associations that will be more focused on the individual differences, where each individual member will stand first for what they are as individual and second for their profession. We will be taking off the masks that we wear as professionals, just as we took off the ties. Sorry, but you know, that's part of this deconstruction that we are. It is not going to stop here. It is going to go much, much further. And I think that as associations, this will also enable more cooperation between associations, because we will have the richness of our individual members to share. You know? And that's the future of IP associations for me. Myrtha.
En lo que va de PTMG, hace poco estuvimos revisando cuál es el objetivo de la asociación y
some time ago we were looking at the objective of the association and saying that ethical values remain the same, but I think we agree that we are still an organization that is completely open to everyone, all pharmaceutical companies and associated companies, and hopefully will continue to be an example of what true collaboration and respect is. As I've been mentioning, I think our future is one of a vision of more social responsibility. I've worked in some think tanks on the offices of the future and the firms of the future. I think we are evolving quite quickly, and we have to be at the vanguard. So we're looking at this duality in terms of what the brand will look like in the future, how INTA has to evolve in order to serve its members in a more effective manner. And we'll also continue being an organization with more social responsibility. We must promote social responsibility on all fronts, and this is one of the challenges that comes for us in the future.
Translation. I think for FICPI, what I see in the near future, in addition to continuing all of its initiatives, is really trying to grow our membership. And I don't mean really in numbers, but what I'm talking about is in diversity and additional members from countries where we only have a few members, from countries where we don't have any members yet, and really trying to increase our engagement. And I have to say that I'm so impressed with ASIPI's engagement of its members. And we have a lot to learn from you, and I want to increase our membership and increase our engagement.
Thank you.
Really quickly, engagement is very important, and we are looking at ways to be active throughout the year to pull in our membership for providing practical tools and fresh perspectives. But the other piece that I always think about, and it is because my career depended on it, think about the children, the young lawyers or the lawyers in the making, the law students. And I've heard wonderful things about ASIPI's initiatives for education of people who want to go into the law and have an opportunity for scholarships. Mentoring is such an important part of association work, and all of us get a chance in one way or another, big or small. So as a member of AIPPI, I can say firsthand experience, many of my colleagues are very dedicated to that, taking an extra moment to explain something or to bring somebody into a legal question or bring them into the association slowly. It's worth it. It's a good investment. That's the future.
Could I get the slides back up for just a second? So rather than, no, I'm on the board. rather than, so the future. I'm going to give you one more book reference, and that's The Code Breakers by Walter Isaacson. Isaacson is a fantastic author. He was at the Aspen Institute. He was the editor-in-chief of Time, and he's a historian. And he wrote a book about Jennifer Doudna and the Cas6 developments with CRISPR. It's a fantastic read. What I would like you to take out of it is his two most important lessons are the importance for science of collaboration and competition. We're all competitors, but we're all collaborators too. And that's what's critical. If you look at a bunch of old Daumier prints, I love them. There's one where the two advocates are standing across the aisle screaming at each other, and then the next print, they're sitting in the bar having lunch right after the argument is over. And that's really what it's all about. We need to cooperate with each other. We need to work toward harmonization. The system is too split, it's too separate, it's too national, and that costs people money without benefit. So if we can do that, we can work together to build a better intellectual property system, a balanced intellectual property system that helps not only everyone in this room, but all of your clients and your kids and their kids, and it makes a better society that will benefit from innovation.
Muchas gracias, Patrick. Bueno, el tiempo se nos acabó. Podríamos estar aquí por horas platicando.
Very well. We could be here for hours, but on behalf of the executive committee, the organizing committee, I'd like to thank you for your time, your presence, and the love with which you address us. Thank you.